Thank you.
Senator Beck.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I just want to ask some questions regarding the Redbank project, the operators of the Redbank Power Station in the Hunter Valley. And I want to take you to the Liable Entities Public Information Database for the year 2013-14 and ask if you or your officers can confirm that the Redbank project at that point had an outstanding carbon tax bill of some $36.55 million, made up, I think, of 26,759,000 of unpaid provisional units and 9.798 million of unpaid final units as at the end of June 2014.
Yes, I can give you the precise information on that, and just perhaps for the benefit of the committee, just to create some context for this. So we've now had the final acquittal of the carbon tax, carbon pricing mechanism. As I mentioned earlier, that was completed on 2nd of February, and so we have published the liable entities public information database, which provides a great deal of transparency on the circumstances, and therefore Senator Back was able to interrogate that and see exactly what the situation was. And in fact, we again had a very high level of compliance indeed. So there are, at this point in time, there are only two entities that are in shortfall, and one of them is Redbank, and the committee should be aware that Redbank is in receivership and has been for some time, and so that has curtailed its ability as an entity to transact. And I'd also mention that in that context, the Clean Energy Regulator is an unsecured creditor, so we're one of many creditors of that entity. So going to the numbers, so in fact, as things currently stand, Redbank had did not fully acquit its liability for the 2012-13 year. It has not acquit any of its liability for the 2013-14 year, and therefore its total shortfall is equivalent to something just short of 1.5 million units, which as we stand is equivalent to a debt to the Clean Energy Regulator of some 46 million in shortfall charge. And on top of that, they are accruing late payment penalties, which currently stand something shy of $5 million. So that is the situation as it stands.
So the figure's about 51 million as of now. Now, you were saying the company went into receivership. Do you know when that was and when you were informed of that?
I'm not sure if I have that date, but it certainly goes back to...
Perhaps you could take it on notice.
We could take that on notice, and as to when we were advised by Redbank that
my advice is
receivers.
that they went into receivership on the 5th of October 2013.
2013. So it certainly was in 2013. I just don't have the dates in front of me.
Now, I understand the company actually made a profit of some $26 million in the 2011-12 financial year, but that it went into receivership in October 2013, and then I think my information is that the power station was actually closed up by the receivers in October 2014. Is that your understanding?
I'm not able to comment, Senator, on the decisions made by the receivers in terms of how they operate that business.
Now, I wonder if you could confirm that Redbank actually did receive from the Energy Security Fund some $17.7 million, being a cash payment of some $8.7 million from the Clean Energy Regulator in cash, and a further figure of some $8.8 million in carbon units at a fixed unit price from the Department of the Environment. Is my information correct?
Slightly out of kilter, Senator, but in broad it's correct. So under the Energy Security Fund, which was established to deal with some issues in the generation sector, the arrangement was that for the first year there would be a cash payment which was against the 2012-13 anticipated liability, and that was $8.8 million, or 8.8 in round terms, as you've said. That was calculated and paid by the department, so there was the division of responsibilities there was the department was responsible for that cash arrangement, and then under the provisions for the 2013-14 liable year, the Clean Energy Regulator had the responsibility for that as part of the industry assistance program, and we issued 365,600 units in September 2013, and again that's on the public record. You can see that information on our website, and you're correct, that has a cash equivalent of roughly the same amount of money.
So those funds were passed over in September 2013, and then the business went into receivership on the 5th of October 2013, only some days or weeks after that. Am I right when I heard you say that the Clean Energy Regulator is an unsecured creditor of that figure now totalling 51 million?
That's correct. That's the standing that we have. So just if I can go back, I don't draw any conclusion about the timing of the receivership relative to the receipt of the units. The units were issued at the time it was provided for. The units that were provided according to the schedule that was legislated, and I would say that at the time, the Redbank had partially acquitted its liability for 2013. So they had a liability which was some 1.1 million units, and they had actually surrendered 820,000 units on time. So it was only in February 2014, so that after the issuance of the units and after they got into receivership, that they went into shortfall with respect to that first year. So the timing is a little bit complicated. I should also just say, actually, I should correct something that I said with respect to the outstanding debt, because what I summarised was the shortfall charge and the late payment penalties, but in fact we had received part payment against that total, which is, you said was around 51 million, so they have paid $5.7 million against their outstanding against the liability, but that still leaves an outstanding liability, including the late payment charges of approximately $45 million.
When you say they paid the 5.7,
the receivers have paid
5.7.
So they have made some endeavours to reduce the liability.
Now, if I could just ask, the retailer, I understand, is a company called Energy Australia, who would have been charging the carbon tax to the customers of the generator and collecting those funds as part of the invoices, including the carbon tax component. So that is actually a collection of a tax payable to the federal government, isn't it? Collected presumably by the retailer and passed on to the generator who would have the liability. I'm at a loss to understand how those funds collected from customers in consideration of a tax payable to the Australian government would not in fact be a highly secured creditor. How could the federal government not be a secured creditor in consideration of taxes collected from consumers of the electricity?
Well, Senator, you go to actually several questions of policy in that in that question. So I'll answer the bits that I can, and possibly Mr. Kennedy might want to comment on the rest. So just first of all, in terms of where the liabilities and the obligation is, the way that the carbon tax worked was that the liable entity was, in the electricity market, is the generator who actually burns the fuel and
That's correct,
has
yes.
the emissions. So they are the liable entity. The prices that they receive for their energy in the wholesale market did increase to essentially allow them to pass that through. But there isn't a direct pass-through which places the tax obligation on the retailer. So the question really still, I think, goes rather more simply to, well, here's an entity that received revenue for its generation in the market. It's now in receivership for whatever reasons, and therefore is unable to meet its obligations, not just to the Commonwealth of Australia, but also to its many other creditors. And so there is a and again, you could say, well, that sort of relationship is no different from any of the other inputs. So, for example, if they couldn't pay their interest charges to the bank, there's some other customer of the bank that's involved in that whole chain. But to get back to the question of, is the Commonwealth a secured creditor, that's a policy matter that I assume is the same for all taxes, that it's not where the Commonwealth stands in the hierarchy.
Can I then ask you, has there been dialogue between you or your office and the receivers, who I understand to be KordaMentha, in terms of some arrangement for the payment in full or in part of those funds owing, please?
Well, just to step back for a second, we have a very thoroughly articulated debt management policy, which really goes to, in the end, our duty is to maximise the recovery, or the reasonable prospects of recovery of those debts. And I would say that we have been highly successful in this, that we have been able to recover most of the shortfall charges. They have been paid. There have been some entities that we have had to pursue in various ways, and we haven't been reticent to do that, but it's a series of steps that we go through. So in the case of this receiver, it's no different from any of these others. We have discussed their situation with them. We have pressed them for payment. In this case, they have made representations to us about the process that they're going through, which we have taken into account. As I say, that led to that part payment, which only goes a small way to satisfying the obligation, but nevertheless we felt that was important to receive that. We have not, we're not actually able to forgive the debt, but we have not stepped back from pursuing it, but naturally we have to pursue that in the context of how that receivership is proceeding and what is the process that is likely to lead to the outcome where we best recover those outstanding debts on behalf of the Commonwealth.
So you can assure the committee that there's been no agreement reached with the receiver managers to forgive the balance of that, what would be close to $45.6 or $7 million.
Absolutely not, Senator. I mean, not only would we not contemplate that, but we actually don't have the power. The only person who can forgive debts is the Minister for Finance, and I don't believe that process has got anywhere close.
It's very forgiving in many ways, but not so much in those ways. That situation has not arisen as of yet, and we certainly wouldn't be recommending that was contemplated at this stage in the process.
I do have a couple of other questions in that same context I'll put on notice, but just very briefly, if I may, Chair, I just want to go for one quick moment to the Gullen Range Wind Farm, if I may, and take you to some answers from the 27th of November estimates last year, numbers 201 and 202. And in those instances, the statements made, and I'll quote them, and perhaps if I'm wrong you can correct me, that the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment has not to date alleged that this wind farm is breaching or contravening state law. That was the 27th of November. I then want to take you to a statement from the New South Wales Department of Planning's media release of the 10th of October 2004, about 6 weeks earlier, in which the department stated that the department shared the local community's opinion that the new positions of 9 wind turbines at Gullen Range were inconsistent with the conditions of consent, and as such the department is pursuing action on those turbines which are considered to be in breach due to a significant departure from approved location. You may recall this is an installation where a number of turbines were placed in the wrong positions against the approval from the New South Wales Department. My questions to you, of course, are first of all, how many LGCs for that wind farm has the Clean Energy Regulator validated? And secondly, armed with the knowledge that in fact some 6 weeks before you responded to the questions asked in estimates in November last year, the State Department had already publicly stated that the wind farm was not in compliance with its conditions of approval.
Well, again, Senator, first of all, I would say we do address this matter in our submission to the Senate inquiry into wind farms, and so we hope to be able to have that perhaps more detailed discussion of the Gullen Range case with you then. To the sequence of events, actually since both that media release, our response to your question, someone has moved on, and you'll be aware, I'm sure, of the fact sheet that was released by the New South Wales Department in December 2014, which I think somewhat clarifies their position. So they did not, although they, again, it's this question of that they at the time were concerned that they, that those towers, certain of them, might not have been in compliance, and they're still investigating that question. They did not actually, in their media release, assert that they weren't, and we discussed